wonderful family we get to interview tonight. We had a wonderful couple, a mother and a father through adoption, that are with us and open to answering all our questions and sharing what their journey has been like. Before we jump into our discussion for the evening, I just want to say that we're glad that you're here with us and have chosen to take some time out of your maybe you're viewing when there may be other things to view tonight, and you're with us here and you're taking this step to expand your knowledge of adoption. If you'd like to reach out to us for your first time ever, our number is 1-800-923-6784, or you can always email our applications department with questions, apply, APPLY, at lifetimeadoption.com. Any information you might miss as far as our contact info can be found on our main website at lifetimeadoption.com. That's lifetimeadoption.com. Also, if you're just browsing around on the internet as you listen, although we have some great photos to show you, if you're browsing around, make sure you follow us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/open.adoption. facebook.com/open.adoption, and we want to make sure that all your questions are answered. If you have a question that doesn't pertain to our conversation at hand, then if it's not answered tonight, then please feel free to call or email with your questions so that we can help lighten that load for you. And again, the number is 1-800-923-6784. If you'd like to call and speak with us, we have an open door policy and want to be sure you get the information you need to make informed decisions going forward for your family. So with that, Libby, thank you for setting all this up for us tonight.
Oh, I'm excited to have Brent and Latonia on to share their story. And one of the things that stands out to me, aside from the fact that we just had Father's Day yesterday, and I'm really excited to have a couple on because it's been a little while since we had the male perspective with us. But this family in particular, they have a lot of observations and insights that are dear to their heart through their personal journey that I know that they've also wanted to just give back to other people who are thinking about and planning adoption. In particular, what keeps standing out in my mind is just a common question we hear from families in any phase. And again, I want to emphasize that we have a unique audience tonight because it's truly blended of people who are just barely beginning to think about adopting a child, all the way to people who are actively getting things together and ready to join Lifetime's program. And then we have people with us who are currently waiting to be chosen in Lifetime's program. And then some of you, I know, are actually matched with birth mothers that you found through Lifetime, and you're pursuing that path to see, you know, that you're going to unfold that into your adoption dream come true. So what that means is that all of you may have sort of a different level of question or a different idea of what open adoption is like, but I think one of the best ways to find answers, but also to find peace and comfort and to look forward to what's ahead through open adoption is to continue hearing other adoption stories. And Brent and Latonia's perspective through open adoption, I feel like is just, it's inspiring because it's so real and authentic, and really, I mean, as you'll hear from them, I was just speaking with them before the call, you know, they even made the comment that it just grew organically. And so those of you who read the emails, you know, you may have seen that we emphasized how they embraced their child's birth mother in a way that they never expected. And so I really want to encourage all of you to ask questions, even if you feel like it's sort of awkward, because I know this family doesn't hold back, but also because if you have a question, it probably means that several others on the call tonight have the same question, and they could benefit from the answer that we pull out. So I just really want to encourage participation in that chat or questions box. And if you're joining us by phone, but you still have access to your email, you can always email me directly, libby@lifetimeadoption.com, and I'll look for those questions to make sure they're included too. And Kim, I know that we also, again, with it being a mixed audience, that if there are people on the call tonight who are looking to take that first step toward becoming a Lifetime family, that they do need to fill out our free application, and you can find that at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, and that'll take you directly there. So I want to get started with this beautiful family we see on the photo on our screen here. and to introduce
Yes,
Brent
this
and
is a real
Latonia.
family.
This is a real lifetime family. So Brent and Latonia, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to this. We had a conversation Friday, and I know that both of you are very strong speakers, and that I hear from a lot of people waiting to adopt, especially when they're pursuing adoption as a husband and wife team, that sometimes they still, even though they're pursuing the same adoption, they see it differently, or they're not always sure, well, what's my role versus his role, or what should I be doing that she shouldn't be doing, or all these questions of how do we navigate this together. And I think that also what you're bringing to us tonight is the ability to see the balance and also the differences of how this was for both of you, so that maybe the people in our audience, men or women, they could hear this and apply it to their own lives and know, okay, I'm not alone. I had that question too, or I've always wondered that. And so having just had Father's Day yesterday, Brent, really, I mean, we could kind of start here at the end. What is it like now that you've been a daddy for 4 years and an adoptive daddy for 2 years to celebrate Father's Day looking at your 2 babies?
Yeah, I mean, it was tremendous. I think it's one of those things where you hear it from everybody. It's sort of the cliche that, you understand, once you're on this side of it, that you can never adequately describe how wonderful it is. There may be challenges there too, but it's absolutely worth it. And, being on this side of it, I can only say that that's true. It's hard to describe it all. But what's so incredibly powerful is recognizing that we have 2 very special children, and that they each have their own uniqueness and specialness, and they're both very, very dear to us. And I think that anybody that might have a concern, for example, going the adoption route, whether or not that they would be, close to the adopted child, or if there's anxieties about that, I can tell you that'll wear off very quickly. After you jump in, there's this little baby that's relying on you, and it's an incredible bonding experience that happens at that point. And and I love both of my children very much, and I had a wonderful Father's Day. And of course, Latonia really helped that happen too, because obviously they weren't, 4 and 2, they weren't really directing that. So.
Right. I'm glad that you brought that up, because we do, over the course of these webinars that Kim and I have hosted, and then certainly with emails, phone calls, and meeting with adoptive parents in person, a lot of times they do have this, whether they're already raising a child that they gave birth to, or if they are just starting out as parents, a lot of times they do have that question of, would I bond with this child in the same way as if I gave birth to them? And I know that that's sort of a topic that is dear to your heart, because you went through that.
So is that for Brent or for me?
Question. Well, I think, but also to piggyback that, I know that you also had a unique approach to adoption, because before you had your son, you were going through infertility, right?
That's right. So, and can you hear me okay? I had just a sound check issue on this end.
Oh, yes, we hear you.
Okay, fantastic, great. So actually, even before Brent and I married, for I think different but even some very similar reasons, both of us independently knew that when we were married and building a family, that adoption was going to be a part of that plan. And so I was ecstatic when I can't even remember who broached it, but we started talking about it as we were preparing for marriage, and to hear that we were both on the same page about building our family through adoption, that was just tremendous to feel like we would both be in it. Our plan was that we would have some biological children first and then adopt, but we actually in the beginning of our marriage were informed that we had less than a 7% chance of getting pregnant through invasive interventional means. And so we thought that our resources were better spent than, since we were committed to adoption, just moving forward with the adoption. And of course, it's funny how God works. We had completed our home study. We were looking to be matched through an agency here in West Virginia when I found out I was pregnant. We went through our pregnancy with Elijah. We were so blessed to have him. And then when he was about a year old, we were like, okay, God really has laid adoption on our heart and to continue to build our family that way. And so we contacted Lifetime. And it was a tremendous experience because, it was great. The home study was done. We just needed to do a few updates, and we came to you all home study ready. And I remember the dates well. We contracted February 25th. We were matched March 25th, and Georgia was born on April 30th. It was amazing.
Which, see, that is amazing because a lot of people have this. I wouldn't say it's a myth that you have to wait a long time to adopt, because I think it's different for every adoption. But that is sort of something that people try and gear up for. Is I'm not going to adopt the month that I sign up, but certainly it can happen any time, and you're proof of that. You're proof of why it's important to be ready and ready to say yes emotionally too.
That's right.
Yeah, can I jump in here? Just one thing that I would say is that for the role of the husband, I think it can be quite anxious, I think, sometimes for the mom to have that quick match happen. And I think there can be a lot of anxiety there. And I will tell you that for us, when that was that quick, that was sort of where I, felt very strongly about it and sort of stepped up and said, no, we're ready. We're ready to go.
Right. And I would say that in my time working with adoptive couples, there's always one in the couple that is in that shoe, which is, what? Okay, I'm a little anxious about that. Are we really going? And then the other one's like, yeah, let's go. I'm already there. And I think that's just, I love seeing that, because to me that is also going to be reflective in probably why these birth mothers choose these families, is because they see a balance in this lifestyle and this marriage and these parents to be, and she wants that, because maybe that's not something she can offer her child in the time when she's pregnant.
Right.
So I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, for both of you, knowing that you were already prepared to adopt and then you became parents biologically, then you came to adoption again. Was it ever a stumbling block to think we're going to pursue open adoption versus, say, international or a closed foster adoption? Where did you stand as far as open adoption when you first decided, okay, now we're going to pursue our second child through adoption?
Right. So, one, we knew that international adoption wasn't for our family. We felt very strongly that there are many children domestically, particularly African American and biracial children, who truly needed homes and families and parents who were going to love them. The reason that we didn't go through the foster route is because we already had Elijah. And we thought that the uncertainty of the foster route was going to be too impactful on him. The idea that we might have a child with us for a little bit of time only to have that child be reunited with their biological family, which while it would be great for that family, I thought that it would just be too confusing. We thought it would be too just impactful on Elijah to have a brother or sister and then to not have that brother or sister. And so we just knew that that was not for us. And so when we started thinking about private adoption and what an open adoption meant, I think maybe the furthest we had thought we would be willing to go would be to do, like, on the anniversary of the adoption, a letter and a photo packet. That's the extent that we thought it would be. We were open to, whatever the birth mom's preference was with regard to meeting us beforehand, we were just open to what worked for her. And so in our case, she was open to us meeting her beforehand. And so that worked out well. We actually, when we were matched, our birth mom was hadn't had a lot of prenatal care, and so she wasn't exactly sure of her due date. So when we were matched, she thought her due date was when we were getting called. And so she was in a different state, and we flew down immediately because we thought she was delivering to go and be there. But we ended up in that state for a couple of weeks, and thankfully we had the flexibility in our jobs that would allow us to be able to do that. Oh, that's a cute picture you guys just put up. And so at any rate, we were there with her for a couple of weeks, and then during that time period, we were able, or I was able to meet her. She was not quite yet ready to meet Brent. And so I ended up taking her to one of her doctor's appointments. And so it was at that doctor's appointment that we found that she wasn't quite ready to deliver. And so then we made the decision to return home. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, we stayed in contact with her. And it was, when I say we, it was primarily me, because at that time, I think I was who she was most comfortable with just at that time.
And that's pretty standard.
Yeah, I think it's pretty standard. And so one of the things that was a concern for us is that she redoubled her commitment to get prenatal care. I think it became very real to her. And so she began really keeping all of her appointments. But we were concerned because, I mean, with us and our experience with having Elijah, we're both professionals. We have access to great health care, and our pregnancy experience with Elijah was fantastic. We had a huge room with hardwood floors, and it was beautiful, and really attentive medical staff and all. And so it was a very positive experience. I was not prepared for the experience through the eyes of our birth mother. The hospital that she had first chosen, it seemed they saw her as, this young African-American unmarried woman who had had multiple pregnancies and a Medicaid card. And unfortunately, their treatment of her reflected quite a bit of judgment. And so I spent the next couple of weeks really trying to encourage her through that. And then it came to the point where Brent and I were just really concerned for our unborn daughter. And we made the decision that I would go back to the state where she was and be there on hand to assist her in any way that she needed until the end of the pregnancy. And so it just so happened.
I mean, that right there is in itself, I think, a lot of people think of open adoption as what happens after the adoption, but it's very much also what happens before it, and you just being open to sharing yourself for George's birth mom in that time, I think speaks volumes to her ability to trust you and keeping your commitment after the adoption too. But I know not all families would be able to do that because, like you said, you had a flexible work schedule, and you decided as a couple, let's do that for her. And unfortunately, Latonia, I love that you're bringing this up because I've worked with women where they've gone through that experience, and I think a lot of times, unless you see it for yourself or you personally know somebody who's been mistreated by medical professionals because of their situation or their type of insurance or whatever it is, these birth moms sometimes go through that, and that I love when I see the adoptive parents come behind her and sort of like protect her.
Like advocate for her too as a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And that trust really, I think that laid a great foundation for the trust. And it just so happened that the day I flew back down there, she went into labor. And I had the great privilege of driving her to the hospital, of being there in the room with her at her request, when she delivered. And then after Georgia was born, again, fully with her request and permission, for me to stay there in the room in the daddy chair, with her, with Georgia and the bassinet between us. And it was 48 hours. It was intense. It was very intense because still in the back of my mind, no papers had been signed yet. In the state we were in, the papers weren't signed until after we were discharged from the hospital. So I did have a little bit of anxiety, and that's where Lifetime really came in as a support for us, to be that voice in the night when I needed someone to just talk to, or my husband needed someone to talk to let us know that, it's going to work out okay. God has a plan intended for you, and it's going to work out. But it was the best opportunity to learn about her. Brent and Elijah weren't able to come until 24 hours after Georgia was born, and so we took that time for me to find out what she was good at in school and what her favorite sports were. And we also had the privilege of I met her father, and I met her biological sister and her biological brother, because they wanted to see Georgia and they wanted to meet me. And her dad had a 45-minute conversation with me that really dove deep into, hey, who's this family that my granddaughter's going to be placed with? And then when Brent and Elijah came, I think I shared this story with you, Libby. We shared it when we talked earlier. It was fabulous because, Elijah walks in, his little 2-year-old guy, and he's like, Trisha, we're here. And he goes over to the bassinet and he sings happy birthday to Georgia. It was the best experience, and it was great because being there in the hospital, you see Brent with Elijah and Georgia. Being there in the hospital, too, I had to go and take a break so I could, change clothes. And Brent, and I let him speak to his experience, he also had time to spend with their birth mom. And we brought stuff with us, like pictures of our home and pictures of where we lived, and they were great props, if you will, to be able to tell our story and let her in a little more with us too. Brent?
Yeah,
that's such a good point. Well, Brent, I was actually going to prompt you here because you made a comment when Latonia started sharing about how it's sort of standard for birth mom to bond with adoptive mom a little bit more. And so I am looking forward to your response about how you found ways to stay involved. That sometimes is the standard when the men kind of have to stand back a little bit and let adoptive mom take the lead in the relationship building, but I would love to hear your experience on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think you have to be true to yourself. I mean, I'm very comfortable, generally speaking, in sort of diving in and being hands-on, and so I think that definitely helped. But I just would encourage, I guess, the gentleman to really consider, where the birth mother's comfortable, of course, but making themselves available because, not only was it an opportunity for me to get to know her and sort of add to it, to the collection of what we know about the birth mom to share with Georgia later on, but also to give her a comfort level that here's an involved dad, and I think she could tell that I was an involved dad from our interaction. Not only that, one of the benefits of having a child already is that I wasn't afraid to pick up Georgia. I wasn't afraid to feed Georgia, even only at a day old, and I think that really went a long ways towards giving her some real comfort, and knowing that, look, this, her daughter is going to, this family that both of them are ready to take care of her at a moment's notice. And, and so I think that was just such a valuable part of the experience. But then there's one other aspect of it, and this just, I think, speaks to the faith aspect. We really cared about the birth mother. It's really important to us that, this wasn't just about, and of course it was important to get Georgia, but it wasn't just about that. And so here, this woman made this incredibly difficult decision to do this. But because she did this, we have this beautiful child in our family. And so care needs to be taken for her too. And she needs to know that she's cared for. And it was an opportunity to talk about our faith, and it was an opportunity, and and I actually think that I probably bond even more with Georgia because of the experience I had with her birth mom.
That's a really good observation. And I know that was actually one of the things that drew you both to open adoption, right, was the ability to tell your child later about where they came from and their birth family's history. And Latonia, you had shared when we spoke last week about how you took time to just ask her about her favorite colors and her family's traditions and things that maybe you could work into conversations as Georgia grows up and has questions about what she like, or what did they like, or what did they think of me, or
That's right. And just being able to like, I wanted to know those things, because if there are, like, my husband and I, like growing up, were of the studious sort. I'm not going to speak for him, but I will tell you I was not an athlete.
You can speak for me.
Okay. Total geek. And so, total geek, really nerdy, studious type. And so should Georgia all of a sudden come out with this athletic prowess, I want to be able to tell her, that, hey, that's a gift that you got from your tummy mommy. She was really great at tennis, and that's why you've got such an awesome reach, or what have you. Like, I want to be able to weave that in. And so we are still in contact. Is it okay to segue into that and kind of talk about how it is after the adoption?
Mm-hmm.
So having met her birth mom too, it was I definitely felt very comfortable with us exchanging cell phone numbers. And I know that and everyone has to go with their own comfort level. We weren't comfortable with like sharing addresses or anything like that. But I was comfortable with sharing our phone number because I know how important technology is. And so probably the first 6 months or so, I would text her every week to 2 weeks. And then probably our schedule now is every 2 to 4 weeks, there's a text message that I'll send with photos of Georgia, and then we, of course, text her around like major holidays. And then at Christmas time, we put together, so we only had 2 Christmases, but any like professional photos that we've had done, we put those together, and we get extras, like little wallet size, in case she would like to share the photos with other people. So we put together a photo packet and send them off to her. The thing that's really cool about it to me is I know there's this other woman out there who cares that Georgia looked cute going to school that day, like her little outfit, who cares that Georgia is speaking in full sentences and, is surpassing all her milestones, through her different like school reports and all. And she, in turn, sends Georgia special messages for her birthday or for Christmas. And just today, because I sent her a Father's Day photo of Georgia on the driving range golfing with Daddy, which I thought was awesome. And so apparently she thought so too. So she texted me back, and I was like, oh, by the way, we had talked before about Georgia having pictures of you and her birth sisters, and so her birth mom sent me 6 photos over text, just so that I'll have them, and we'll decide how to use them. If we want to put them in like a photo book, or if we want to put them in a frame, or if we want to put it in her adoption storybook. At least it gives Georgia, and Elijah too, because he met her birth mom, something to point to as we're talking about this woman that blessed our family in the way that she did. So I see you see my future Tiger Wood-esque. Well, not Tiger Wood, this young lady.
So this
And
was
anyway,
just yesterday
yeah,
for
this
Father's
is
Day.
my future Michelle Wee, and we're thinking golf scholarship.
Okay.
She was holding the club pretty well there.
She was.
Actually, yeah, she's got a pretty decent stance happening.
Yeah, she does.
Somebody must have been showing her something.
Yes.
You know, and what I love about photos like this and getting to see pictures from your life is because I think a lot of times, kind of going back to where we started even, I think sometimes people put almost so much pressure around adoption, like it is a special thing. It's a miracle in itself because it takes extra people for it to come together. But also, you know, life after adoption is just, this is your family, this is your life.
That's right.
And now, being that you are a mixed-race couple, too, part of why I was excited to have you on was because of the comment you made in your emails with me before we coordinated this, Latonia, and you had actually talked about how interesting it is that people will make questions or questions known or comments known just when they see your family out and about. And I know that that's a concern that people have when they're adopting a child of a different race. And looking at you, you're a biracial couple.
Right.
You have a biracial son together. I think a lot of times maybe a couple where both husband and wife are white, they might not even anticipate that there would be questions when a family like you includes, you know, children who are already mixed race. But
Right.
certainly as a mixed race family, you're not void to that people still have questions. What was it like for you to decide, you know, yes, we would be open to adopting a child of a different race than the child we already have, or that's different than me as a parent?
Right.
And then what's it like for you now when you meet people who have questions or you have to talk to your kids about that?
Sure. Thanks. Okay, so I think when we were going into it and deciding on specifically adopting an African American or biracial child, and this is, by the way, the day the adoption was finalized. So when
I love her dress. That dress is awesome.
So cute.
Thank you. So when we were going into it, I think it was more about the need than anything else. The fact that there, again, are so many African American and biracial children who need parents. So the need was the primary driving factor then. We also, we did talk about it with regard to we live in West Virginia, but we live like right outside of D.C. I actually work in Washington, D.C. So it is a pretty accepting area. There's lots and lots of adoptive families in our area. But we do still get comments. I'm amazed at the number of people who feel that it's okay to walk up to strangers and opine on their family makeup. I will say that it's good to not assume that everyone has nefarious intent when they are asking questions, that some people may be just curious. Some people may be considering adoption themselves. And so to not assume the worst when people ask questions. That said, we've had a couple of experiences, and maybe Brent can speak to this too, because particularly other African American people can tell that Georgia is not mixed race. It's very clear that she isn't, and our son is. And so because she came second, we had one instance in particular when we were not in our area, where a waitress was a little frosty to me, real nice to
me,
to Brent and to our kids, but a little frosty to me. And then at the end, she commented on how strange it was, just curious how it happened that our son looked like both of us, but my daughter didn't. Wonder how that happened. And so we were like, well, now, that just wasn't very nice. Or Brent will get people who will assume that he and his partner adopted Georgia when I'm not with them.
Yeah, well, and to speak to that a little bit, you know, I mean, this isn't really some of these experiences aren't even unique to adoption.
Right.
Because, you know, I've been out with Elijah before, and I've had a couple of nice older ladies in front of me say, "He's surely not yours, is he?" And you know, and that seems just completely offensive. But I knew they didn't mean any harm by it, and so there's an opportunity, honestly, to engage in discussion with people if they're friendly about it. And I think that it goes with the territory, but it, you know, everything considered, it hasn't happened that often.
Right.
It'll probably happen some, and I think it's an opportunity for two things. One, to, if the people are open to it and friendly, to educate people about your family situation, so that they understand, well, you know, there's other ways to do this. This is adoption and so on. And then two, to really model for your children how you handle those sorts of things, because I think that will have an impact on them. It's a lot easier for them to understand there's nothing unusual about the situation if mom and dad take it in stride. Right. And say, yeah, no, there's nothing unusual here at all.
Yeah. And half of if not more of our friends are either, actually I'd say about 80% of our friends are either mixed race couples, be it Asian and white, or Hispanic and white, or Hispanic and black, or what have you. It's like it runs the gamut. And then about half of them are adoptive parents too, with children who are not of their same ethnicity. So to the extent that you're able to find connections within the adoption community, we highly encourage you to do so, because for our kids who don't all look like their parents is not outside the norm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And can I just add one little piece? We hadn't talked about this before, Libby, but I do feel that it's important, particularly for adoptive parents who are thinking of adopting either full or partial African American children, especially for the little girls. In the African American community, hair matters. And if you are thinking of adopting a little girl who is of full or partial African American descent, please find friends or go to a hair salon or some other resource to find the best way to work with her hair. Hair is a huge self-esteem thing too, particularly as they grow to be little girls, and just knowing how to take care of their hair. I know it may sound vain. You would be surprised there are books written on it. How other people within the African American community would either view you or your child, or how she feels about herself. Please just, you know, a little plug for taking care of that. There's great.
I think that's a great point, because I've actually I've heard some hopeful adoptive parents actually say that's sort of even the point where they stop considering adopting a child of African American background, because they were so worried about how am I going to care for her different physical needs, even down to that hair.
Yeah, and it's not, if you know how to do it, it isn't that hard. And I'm going to give your folks a great resource out there. It's called it's called Chocolate Hair Vanilla Care. I know that sounds great. It's the best website that I have found. It's hosted by a woman who is Caucasian, and her daughter is full African American and adopted. And she gives the best tips that are easy to understand. It's great for black parents too, but particularly easy to understand for Caucasian parents on how to take care of black hair. Again, Chocolate Hair Vanilla Care. Awesome website resource.
I'm even thinking of dads who maybe want to get involved in some bonding time by getting some of those tips too. Like if mom's out of town, what are you going to do?
That's right.
Yeah, and I have to confess I have to learn that yet, but I will but I will put the bows in her hair, and there's certain things I will do, and I think that you know, speaking from my end of it, I think one of the most important things that I can think of, you know, in my family, you know, I'm kind of the standout. I'm kind of the odd person out in my family as far as anyway, as far as looks go. And I think sometimes one of the best things, one of the best services you can do for yourself is to be open and just learn. And without you know, then you can learn so much that you think you're an expert on the subject, and trust me, you're not, and neither am I. But just being open to learn, because I think that's another thing that is really going to be helpful for the children. And it isn't that, you know, and some people want to do this, and I think it's fine. It's not that I want to immerse them in something, in some type of stereotypical culture, but it is being familiar enough with it that they don't feel so distant or away from you know, what their ethnic heritage is, so that you know at least a little something. And I think that, of course, I'm blessed that I have Latonia for that, and I ask her lots of questions, and she doesn't look at me like I have two heads when I ask those questions, which is really nice.
And I ask Brent questions too.
Yeah, it works both ways. Because I didn't grow up in the
Midwest.
Yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage people to have sort of that attitude, where it's good to learn. It's important to understand. I think this is just me speaking from a white perspective, and I think it's really important to understand that we aren't going to learn things through experience. You know, we may get a little bit of a hint in some of the experiences we have if we face something as a family. You may understand a certain element of fear that can be in a place where you're standing out, but you're not really going to learn through experience. So you just have to do the best you can to be empathetic and sympathetic to people who have had experiences, and that will help you understand then, when you are meeting different people, why they may have certain responses to you. Like, for instance, when I'm alone with Georgia, and that's something that that has helped a great deal, because at least I understand where maybe some people are coming from, and it helps. It really helps, because sometimes I can head off at the pass something that I think somebody's going to be concerned about, because I know exactly what they're thinking.
Well, and I'm even thinking that that's good advice, no matter your race, but when it comes to, you know, getting to know your child's birth mother, that a lot of times these women, you know, there's sort of a stereotype placed on birth mom a lot, and usually she doesn't fit that stereotype.
Right.
And that if she's already raising children, then she decides to place this child. It doesn't mean, you know, one thing versus this is her first pregnancy, and oops, I only had sex with my high school sweetheart, and, you know, this little surprise came. I mean, you just can't put her in a box. You have to say she has her own experiences, and I think going back to the story you told about nurturing her and being an advocate for her through her prenatal experience and the hospital experience with Georgia's delivery, is that you as a couple had the ability to believe her. Right. That when she was saying, the doctor's telling me this, but the nurses aren't helping me get this kind of help or this kind of answer, and so I've been kind of nervous about going. I haven't really even pushed that because they don't take care of me. That instead of doubting her and thinking, what are you hiding, that you actually thought, let's check this out. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt, because we don't know her experience personally. That hasn't ever happened to us.
Right. That's exactly right. And, you know, I think the word that just keeps running through my head as I think about it is to speak to her, to have unreserved positive regard for her, to still be wise, but above all, to respect her as a person and to respect the experiences that she brings to the table. You know, because we already had a child when we were in the hospital, when I was there in the hospital room with her with Georgia, she wanted to share different things about taking care of a child and all. And I was literally twice her age. And so, you know, it would have been very easy for me to put myself in the position of why are you telling me this? One, I already have a child, and two, I could be your mom. Instead, I really made sure that we took the time to listen to what it was that she had to tell us and the experiences that she had had with her other children to help inform, and I'm not saying you have to take 100% all of the advice that the birth mom gives. Not at all. Everyone has a different parenting perspective, but at least give her the opportunity to be heard. Oh, that's by the way, there's swing dancing because my husband and I love the swing dance, and so we took the kids to the swing dance. And so Elijah's having great fun. And for the longest time in the double stroller, the kids liked holding hands with each other. Fantastic. But one other point in going back to respecting what she has to say, she mentioned to us that her other two children had had issues with milk. And so when it came up when Georgia turned 2 that she seemed to be having some real serious tummy issues, I was able to immediately remember like what she said to be on the lookout for because her other children had experienced this. And we very quickly got to the lactose intolerance
It could have taken us a long time otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, and that is right there one of the probably top 3 benefits of open adoption, at least to the child and to the adoptive parents. But I would say that that's also a gift you're able to give her birth mother, is to actually acknowledge her advice and her wisdom and experience, but also just her own personal background, because I know, any of us like to be right, and we like to be able to have that helpful answer. And it probably, I would say, speaking from somebody who's worked with many women who've chosen adoption, that a lot of them have this fear, even when they know that it's the right choice and that they've chosen an amazing couple, they worry, just like we heard in Tammy's story a few weeks ago, when she shared her experience over 18 years of being a birth mother. Sometimes they worry, did I do the right thing? Is my child getting the care they need? And was it the responsible thing? Did I do the best for my child in that decision? And I think being able to have open adoption and for her just to be able to tell you about her other kids and what they've had issues with medically, what an awesome mom thing to offer her daughter's parents.
Right. That's right.
I think that would be really uplifting for her. And again, I see open adoption, especially through your family and the way you're talking about Georgia's birth mom, as just this reflection of you're regarding her as another person. She's not just some provider of your blessing, that she has feelings and that you want to include her along the way, but it's just like any other relationship, and that trust sort of has to continue to be fostered and maintained. And going to her, I would say, for that kind of information, or even to be able to update her and say, hey, I'm so glad you told me that at the hospital because this just started and we wouldn't have even known where to look first.
Right.
She probably felt like, yeah, they really did listen to me.
Right. That's right.
I think that's amazing, and it's all in, again, going back to all those little things that you're just living this. It's not something that you had to sketch a recipe out of instructions and make it happen a certain way. That this is something day by day that you're developing and maintaining this woman in your life.
Yeah, that's right. I think the only thing I do differently is that I take more pictures on my iPhone because it's easier to text than to that's it. The rest of it is raising our kids.
Latonia, I loved something that you told me Friday, and I think you brought it out a little bit tonight, was just that you said one of the things you love is being able to share your daughter's cute moments with somebody else who cares as much about them as you do, because sometimes that's kind of hard. You think everybody thinks that their kid is the cutest kid.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
But
so
now she has 2 women who think that.
Yeah. That's right.
I love this, and so I've been showing some photos here of your brother and sister that you're raising here, and what has it been like now that they're getting a little older? I'm sure they're still young, but you've been talking about adoption. a lot of times adoptive parents have these questions about, well, how am I going to tell my older children about adoption, or, you know, how am I going to explain what it's like to have open adoption as we're kind of going through this? What's it like now having a 2- and a 4-year-old and maybe starting some of these conversations a little bit?
Yeah. So that's a great question. One of the things, Elijah in particular, had been asking, of course, about growing in mommy's tummy. And so he asked if Georgia grew in mommy's tummy. And that was a great segue or opening for a discussion around Georgia's tummy mommy and how another mommy grew Georgia in her tummy and then made sure that Georgia had a mommy and a daddy who loved her so very much that she had Georgia come to live with them and knew that she needed a great big brother who could take care of her. And that's why Georgia is his sister and in our family. We started the prepping, and it was, our timing for the match was perfect because at the time he was 2, and so we knew that it would be hard to, you know, draw out the adoption discussion because a 2-year-old, their attention span, you know, is only but so much. And so we took that month to talk to him about his baby that he was going to get. And his sister, and he was going to be the big brother and had to look out for her and all. And man, has he taken that charge seriously. He really has. And in fact, to the point where when she was really little and we'd have her in the car seat carrier, he wouldn't let anyone look at her or get close to her because she was his baby and he was protecting her and keeping her safe, especially if another kid wanted to get there. And even now, just we were just with friends this past weekend, and he got to play with the big boys, and they were looking at a video game, and he made sure that he said to the older boys that they had to give Georgia a turn so that she could play on the video game too. He does a great job of looking out for her. And she wants to do everything that Elijah does. Everything.
Well, I mean, I love this little picture of them holding hands in the stroller, and here they're dancing together. And I just think, a lot of times, you know, we talked about the parental bonding questions, and I would say, you know, if I was to get candid, because I know what a lot of people wonder when they're thinking about adopting, and it sometimes does come down to, you know, is this going to be so noticeable that we're always going to be thinking about adoption, but deep down everybody knows, well, of course not, because I think, Brent, you made a comment to say, like, well, I'm not biologically related to my wife, and I had no trouble bonding with her.
Right.
You know, and that we have friends and cousins and then sibling spouses and just all of these people in our lives that we come to call family, but adoption just puts this legally enforceable label on something. And but a lot of times I think there's probably some parents in the audience tonight who are thinking, yeah, I'm really glad that you talked about your older child, because that is a concern of mine sometimes, is to make sure that their well-being and placement in the family is just as special as this child who gets a little extra family through open adoption.
Right.
And it sounds like so far he's adjusted just as well as all of you have.
So far, so good.
We're, you know, this hour's just flown, and I'm grateful that you did bring up the hair care tip and that we got to touch on some of the hot buttons. And I feel like probably there's some families in the audience who would just love maybe even to go more into depth on some of the harder to ask questions, but they're being a little shy tonight. We did have a question earlier, but I think, Brent, you covered it, because somebody wanted to know, when you did meet those older women who wanted to know if your son Elijah was actually your child, how you actually handled that specific situation.
Well, so I have to be honest. Sometimes I like to have fun with people a little bit, and so with them, I was pretty candid, and I said, yes, he's my son, and my wife's African American. But I did have a situation where I had him in the stroller, and someone asked what ethnicity, or they didn't ask what ethnicity. They said, "Where's your wife from?" And I said, Virginia. And they said, no, no, no. I mean, where's, what is she? I said, American. and so I just, I just, sometimes I have a little fun with that. And I think it's good to do that sometimes because it just kind of keeps things light and you don't take things too seriously. And then I let them know, well, yeah, we're a interracial couple, and I think it's it's pretty easy for me to just be open and honest most of the time with even complete strangers, and I just don't have an issue with that. Other people may not be as comfortable with that, but I would encourage them to, at least engage in conversation with people, because I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, and sometimes we have the opportunity to help turn that around. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel like a lot of times these stories are sort of twofold, because all of the things you're talking about really aren't things that are only applied to adoptive parents. I mean, we're going to have questions whether your child has a learning disability or a food allergy or asthma, or if if their kids go to school with kids that maybe don't have as much income in their house, so they're wearing the same outfit every other day, and maybe their teeth aren't brushed or something. I mean, all of these, I think, Brent, your comment earlier just about modeling to your kids how you handle real human questions, and that it's not something to be ashamed of, but that you're raising children to be proud of who they are and to feel belonging in your family. I would say it's just a good model for all families. To not be afraid of the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Kim, have you had any burning questions on your mind, Kim?
No, I wanted to comment too that I think sometimes for interracial couples, it's kind of like the topic of race and how people will receive you is already discussed. For most couples, like you kind of know what you're going into. And I think that's the same thing for interracial adoption. Just prepare yourself for what you're going into and say, yeah, that's something I'm willing to anticipate in life. And sometimes you get comments, and sometimes there are days that go by when there aren't any comments.
But
it's like you were Yeah. It's like you were saying, Libby. I mean, if it's a sunburn, people just want to comment. It's part of being in the world. So.
Yes, I have naturally pink skin, and people are always assuming I'm sunburned and want to tell me how sunburned I am. And
right. Yeah, everyone's got
some way to point out a difference or a curiosity.
That's right.
And it is a good reminder to just slow down and remember that it's usually innocent and well-intended.
That's right.
And that if they're friendly, then you just respond in the same way. We had a question here that said, have you had visits with Georgia's birth mom, and how has that worked?
All right, so we haven't had an opportunity to go back to the state where her birth mom is. That isn't to say that we are opposed, not at all. It's just, it's a bit further. It's not a car trip for us to get there. We don't have to fly to get there. But as the kids get older, we would certainly be open to doing that. One of the things that was most important to her birth mom was that she knows that she has birth siblings, particularly her birth sisters, and then she also has a birth brother that was adopted out as well, that she doesn't have contact with, or doesn't have the opportunity to have contact with, would be up to someone else, not the birth mom.
And so just to kind of tie back into, we had somebody, I think that we had a couple questions that may have joined us a little bit late, because they asked, what were your fears in the beginning with open adoption? But it's making me remember this awesome statement that you both made when we talked last week. Brenda, I remember you saying it's so important to be yourself. And then Latonia, I remember you saying, don't be afraid of a relationship after the adoption.
That's right. Yeah, don't be afraid of that. Now, I will say, too, I think it's healthy for you to know what your boundaries are, and to set those boundaries. Like I mentioned earlier, it was not a comfortable place for us to give her our address or have her come to visit us in our home. We just know that's a boundary that we have. And then we also wanted to, like, we do care so much for her, but we also knew that we couldn't allow ourselves or our family to be in a place where if there were like dramatic type issues that she had going on in her life, because the reasons that she's placing for adoption is because there's some instability there, or could be instability there. And so we also had to know that we couldn't allow ourselves to become wrapped up in that. And it is a fine line to walk and to balance in showing caring, but without becoming embroiled in any issues that may be there. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we wanted to keep it healthy for our family, for our daughter and our son.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly feel that we're in a healthy place.
I think that's really good advice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because
not
every
to
adoption
internalize
is so
those.
different. Mm-hmm.
Well, and sometimes people just, it's human nature when you have a connection with someone and they have something going on that's a little more dramatic or a hardship, you want to step in and rescue or give advice or internalize it and commiserate, but you have a different type of connection and it's focused on your adoption connection. And that's just a healthy boundary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, but it's not something that makes you cold or shut off to her.
No.
It's just that within yourselves, you know, and this is a question actually, it's a really good reminder. I get this question a lot after adoptions because, like we talked about earlier, sometimes these women are in situations that none of us can really imagine getting into because there was a fork in the road that we took differently perhaps, or we just have different support around us, or, you know, it's just things happen and these women end up in the shoes that they're walking in. And sometimes because you were such a support during the match and then through the adoption process, these women come to trust, wow, you know, I've never had people in my life like this. I'm going to go to them for this kind of advice or support too. And it is beyond your relationship's abilities at this point.
Or comfort level. Everyone's going to make their own personal choice.
And that it's okay to remember that you're keeping your promise to her by raising her daughter and letting her know how you're all doing, that's the first and foremost focus. And then everything after that, you know, some families may feel very comfortable saying, oh gosh, you know, you just lost your home. Why don't you come stay with us for a few weeks while you get things together? Now that's very rare, but then most families fall in the category of, gosh, we're so sorry you're going through that. You know, we'll pray for you, or just let us know how you're doing because, you know, we hate to hear that you feel so hopeless, but, you know, and then even pointing them back to Lifetime or their adoption counselor, and if it's adoption related, and that it's not something adoptive parents have to feel that they just take on this huge role, all encompassing, but it's like any relationship. You know, sometimes I compare it to if you had a family member or even a grown child that maybe has experience with drugs or theft. It's not going to change the way you love them, but you're going to change how much you let them in your life based on what's going on in their choices.
Right.
And so, again, not to say that that's going on with George's birth mother, but just that I think with any adoption, even if you have two adoptions within your family and you have two different birth families, you may have different relationships with each one, just kind of based on also the personal connection that you just make with them. Because not everybody, you know, not everybody's destined to be best friends.
That's right.
It's just that you can respect them and love them. And we had a question here that said, what involvement do you have with George's birth father?
So George's birth father is unknown. He's unknown to the birth mother. And so in the state where we adopted, there's a putative birth father registry where we had to put out an advertisement that if you think you might possibly be her birth father, you know, please contact this number, and no one came forward. So,
Mhm.
right, every state's different in that. Sorry, you may our sitter has reached the capacity, so you may hear our kids in the background. Sorry about that. They're having fun with each other in a tent as they do a fort. But at any rate, yeah, we don't know anything at all about her birth father, and her birth mother doesn't know who he is.
Was
And
that
that's
ever a
something.
concern for you moving forward? Because some families get kind of freaked out about the unknown factors.
Yeah, some families do. That's very true. I think for us, the prenatal component, I think, probably had a lot more, like, um, knowing that there hadn't been any substances, knowing that she was, like, I got to observe firsthand that she was a healthy eater, a healthy size, to the extent that she could with the resources that she had. She herself was healthy. That helped mitigate at least some of the concerns that I had about it. Probably the biggest surprise that we have right now is that she's like maybe 5 feet tall, if that tall. And her other children are also of that stature. And Georgia went from being in the 5th percentile when she's born to the 90th percentile in height. So we thought we knew at least like what some of the physical attributes were going to be, but that's not playing out to be the case. So that's I guess the biggest surprise. I'll tell you, Georgia is a healthy young lady, and she is smart. Oh my gosh. She is so smart. Early talker, little Miss Independent. We have been so blessed by seeing just how sharp she is. Yeah, she's a smart girl. I'm looking forward to see where that goes.
So were they talking about fears of
not knowing who the birth father is?
Yeah. So and I would say from my perspective, one thing that really helped me is I was reminded that even when the child is biologically yours, there's a lot of things you don't know that could happen. And so,
right.
There's always a big unknown, and it doesn't matter if it's adoption or even a biological child. There's going to be a lot of unknowns, and so you have to work, I think, to commit yourself to it. And then some of those fears will just go away because you realize, well, no, this really isn't that much different. So I think, I will admit that I was a little bit scared to begin with, but with that reminder, that really helped. And so I was able to kind of relax a little bit and say, okay, you know what, we may not know everything about the situation, but that's okay.
We got a really solid medical history from the birth mom too, with regard to things in her background, and it wasn't anything it was largely unremarkable what the background was, and so at least knowing half of it, it was enough of a comfort for us.
Right, because at least you have somewhere to start.
Right.
If there are questions, and I love that you're both speaking about these unknowns and how you get through things. And I think what stands out to many of the people commenting right now and also just listening is just how cohesive and joined you both are, obviously, in your lives, walking together as parents through your family. We had a question here that said, do you have any advice for parents who may not be in sync about choosing adoption yet? Did you guys ever face a time when one was wanting to more than the other when it came to choosing adoption?
We didn't really have that challenge so much.
Right.
I think that it is important, I think, to be on the same page with that. And I think a lot of prayer, and I think if you have faith in your life too, I think really turning toward that will help you get on the same page very quickly. And I think that for me, if I had any hesitation going into it, because I think a lot of times it's not always this way, but a lot of times the moms sort of lead the charge on this, or the moms-to-be lead the charge on this. And if I had any hesitation, just seeing how much it meant to her, and really putting that in a biblical perspective for me, is that her wants and needs come above my own. And you really get to be at peace with that very quickly. But in our case, I was really for it to begin with. I mean, I think it was something that I knew I wanted to do, maybe not on the same timetable. So, so that I can at least speak to that, the timetable was maybe a little bit quicker than I initially would have thought. But once we got ready to sign on and decide that we were going to go through the process, I was ready to go at that point. So.
Yeah, we've observed, like I said, we have many friends who are also adoptive parents, and probably the most on-point example that I have, of course, the mom was on board and the dad was skeptical because it was a second marriage and he was older and he just wasn't sure that he wanted to do the parenting thing again. And for him, and I think this may be the case for many men, it became real when their daughter was there. And so once he actually got to see her and hold her and hear her call him Baba and just really have that bond, and again, as Brent spoke to earlier, just that total dependence upon him, it was amazing how quickly he then came on board because it wasn't in the abstract anymore.
That's great. We had a question here, and I think this could be a good way to just wrap up for tonight too, is to get any final thoughts that each of you have. But this said, it was starting off with Brent, but I think that we can hear from both of you. It just said, Brent, any advice for my husband for the process both during and after?
Yeah. So I think just sort of for open-ended advice is to just really be there for your wife and really be there for the birth mom, and just sort of take a breath and take a step back and realize that ultimately everything really is going to be okay, and you have the opportunity. Maybe looking at it as an opportunity is a good way to look at it. Look at it as an opportunity to really provide support and really provide what's needed, because I think that we as men, we tend to be, we want to fix the problems, right? So that's our role. That's what we're good at. We can really do that. So when there's something missing, we go get it. When there's something that needs to be done, we go do it. And if you can get yourself sort of in that mind frame, I think it will help really calm down and relax and allow you to really be present in the moment. So I guess that's the best advice I could have, is to do what comes naturally to you. And
Brent, I have a question. So when you say support, it sometimes helps, especially I think for husbands, to have like practical motions, physical things. Like, what do you mean? Like listening, asking how she's feeling today?
Well, that's good, but I think in exactly what you were saying, it's sort of like if you're taking a car, getting the car ready, doing the packing, making sure that some of those material things are ready to go, doing a little bit of reading up on the subject to see whatever is missed there. And I will say I am a scientist, so I tend to go in the logical progression cycles. But really look for those things. Did we cover all the bases? Did we, are we ready in that way? Are we ready in that way? Even so much as if you know where you're going, for example, for the hospital, looking up to see where the pharmacies are and looking up to see where some of those things are at. And I think that's a really natural role for the husband to be able to play, because I'll tell you, Latonia was there with the birth mom. She couldn't do any of that. She couldn't go get anything. And so, it's good to maybe do some of that work ahead of time so you're ready to go.
Yeah, those are awesome practical tips. Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of the wives are like nodding their heads, and the husbands are going, okay, good, I have an instruction manual. Yeah, make a list, check it off.
I would say, too, to the adoptive moms, there are truths, I think, that span being both an adoptive mom or a biological mom with regard to, bringing that new baby home or that new child home, depending on the age. And I would say don't forget your relationship with your husband. This, to me, being an adoptive parent, to the longing, I think, is maybe even more intense sometimes, particularly if you don't already have a child in the home. And so there's like so much that's been built up around what it's going to be like to be a mom and bring this baby in, and everything has been so focused on this baby that it can be really easy to very quickly lose the relationship and all of that, and or to want to, because you've been longing for this baby so much, to want to do everything yourself for this baby. And one of the great things about adoption is that there are many opportunities for dad to be involved too in feeding, because most adoptive moms aren't going to nurse. So there's lots of opportunities to get in on feeding and diapering and rocking and sitting up with the baby and that kind of thing. Give space for dad to be involved and to bond too. And don't be afraid to let someone else come in and help you, and to give you guys even an hour's space to be able to talk. We would put the babies in the car and go for a drive out here. The car put them to sleep, and it gave us the opportunity to go through drive-through, get an ice cream cone, and chat with each other while we drove. And the babies were sleeping.
That's awesome. It's like a mini date night, sort of.
Yep, that's right.
Exactly.
Babies in tow.
Drive-through date night.
That's right.
Well, because that is a topic that we hear about more and more these days. Is a lot of times women anticipate recovery and postpartum depression after a pregnancy, but there is sort of this buildup when you're intentionally pursuing a child through adoption, that there's so much focus put on this child that I would say that probably there's a lot of people in the audience identifying with either that concern, or just maybe they've already gone through that and they're thinking, yeah, that was a hard mountain to climb when we realized how much focus we'd put on that one thing and we'd neglected these other areas of our family life. Because a lot of times, and I don't want for the single ladies in the audience tonight to think, gosh, we're just all about the couples, because there are some women who have a comfort with choosing a single adoptive mom. But in particular, when a woman says to us, I would really like to choose a married couple, it is because she wants that stable, loving, fun, on the same side marriage to give her child, to have a mom and dad that are in sync with each other and communicate with each other and still enjoy each other's company, and that you have to keep maintaining that throughout their childhood too. And I love that. That's such a great tip for anybody who's anticipating bringing the baby home. Just there are ways to keep that going when you don't have the time.
And can I say, too, for the single women who are on as well, just to let you know, we were actually our birth mother's second choice. Her first choice was a single woman. Our birth mother was single. She knew that. She knew what to expect with that. And so her first choice was a woman who was single. And it is only because that single mom wasn't able to help with some of the birth mom expenses that she had to pass on the adoption, and that we were then afforded the opportunity to adopt Georgia. So I just want the single women to not think that married couples are the only thing that birth moms are looking for. There are different things that about you and about your profile that will attract a birth mother, and sometimes it may seem so innocuous and the thing that you absolutely would not have thought of. So please be encouraged in that.
Was there anything like that about, how George's birth mom chose you guys? Did she make any comments as to what stood out to her? I know someone was asking us earlier.
Right, yeah. Actually, she did. She did to me, and it was because I am African American. She did want her daughter to have the experience of having an African American mom, and so that was what stood out most. But please note too, there wasn't a whole lot about our profile for her to see because we didn't have a profile.
Right, it was so fast.
Right, it was so fast that we were matched right off of our picture on your website and the little blurb that we did. You know, the little quick
temporary profile.
Temporary two-pager. That's what she
Wow.
selected us from. So there wasn't a whole lot until we met, and then she found that there were a lot of similarities in how all three of us were raised, my husband, myself, and her, and the importance of family and extended family that really, I think, sealed the deal. Knowing that there's a lot of extended family to love on Georgia was really important to her, too.
That's great advice. We even had a couple people comment just saying, thank you for recognizing the single hopeful moms out here and sharing that, because that's what we know to be true. And some women will specify certain criteria all the way down to marital status, and that's her right in open adoption. And I think looking at this whole story, obviously it's clear to me that Georgia was meant to be in your family, and I can't imagine her birth mother thinking differently at this point. But there are a lot of stories like that where, for one reason or another, maybe the first choice family was unavailable to her for some reason. And that's why we always encourage women to look at several profiles, because we want her to feel that she has a choice and that she's not just taking the next on the list or settling because her top choice family, you know, she had probably 2 or 3 families that really stood out to her. And she's, you know, everybody has to start somewhere, and it's just amazing that her story led to you and Brent, because I can't imagine a different relationship for her to be having through her daughter.
Yeah, we're glad that it led her to us.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us tonight and spending so much time with us. And I know that you have probably bedtimes to attend to here on the East Coast. And I'm just so grateful that you could spend a little time after with people as they started chiming in with their questions. And I just want to encourage all. Oh, thank you so much. I just want to say I would love to hear any feedback or response from any of you who heard Brent and Latonia's story tonight. And if you wanted to share that, you could email me directly, Libby, Libby, @lifetimeadoption.com. And then, of course, remember, you can always call us and ask questions one-on-one. And for those of you who are exploring Lifetime's program and you're currently reviewing your packet of information, that you remember to access the list of other Lifetime families in there too, because that is an asset. You know, when you're considering which program is going to be right for your adoption future, is to talk with people who have actually gone through it recently. And certainly these adoption stories offer that too. And I just want to thank all of you, and thank you, Kim. You brought up some great points there in the end, and I'm grateful for all your help behind the scenes to answer these questions that we've had typed in along the way. So I hope all of you have a great evening, and we will meet again very soon for a question and answer time.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brent and Latonia.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure to hear all these details, and thank you, everyone, for your interaction, too. We look forward to talking with you next time. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.